Okay, y'all, get comfortable because today we're talking about some movies that really suck. Sorry. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it's going to give you a pretty good overview of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus, which is, in short, to look at a particular subgenre of horror and then pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But this is our Doctorate Level series. This is where we revisit a subgenre that we've already talked about in a previous video, something that we've already looked at 3 movies from, and we add a 4th new Doctorate Level selection. Another movie that is either a little bit more niche or lesser known, or maybe just a little bit newer, something that's kind of fresh, something different, something to add to the discussion about the subgenre. Mostly an excuse to revisit something we've talked about that was pretty cool, so we can talk about it a little bit more. And that's what we're doing today because we're talking about the vampire subgenre. And like I talked about in my previous video on this, I love vampire movies. I love vampires. It's one of my favorite subgenres. I really enjoy this stuff. And I'm not the only one. These are very popular movies. The vampire, especially in recent decades, has really gotten very popular. But right from the beginning, from the origins of horror, the vampire was popular. And it has endured for over 100 years now. And it's really not showing any signs of slowing down. I like these movies a lot. That's why I've used them not just in the vampire subgenre video, but in other videos where they fit too. You know, we talked about how I talked about like let the right one in, and I didn't use that in the vampire subgenre. I used it elsewhere. That happens a lot because, again, I like these movies, so I find places to squeeze them in so I can talk about more vampire movies. And that's what we're going to do today with the Doctorate Level selection. We're going to talk about some more vampire movies, but first we're going to go over the ones we talked about in the previous video in case you missed it. So let's go ahead and get that recap going right now. The first vampire movie we looked at in the previous video was The Lost Boys. And The Lost Boys is one of my favorite movies, honestly. I just absolutely love that movie. I've watched it over and over and over again. And I'm not the only one. It's a very popular movie that has kind of endured in the cultural zeitgeist. It's maybe not quite as relevant now as it was back in the 80s. It's very much an 80s movie, but it still has endured as somewhat of a cultural touchstone for that time period, in part because of the cast, which we talked about quite a bit, and how they were all these big stars from the 80s or future big stars of the 80s. And it's a very well-rounded cast, and everybody's doing really good work, and everybody gets some time to shine in it. And the movie is just really well paced. It's both scary and funny with lots of action. It moves really well. And even modern audiences that may not feel the 80s-ness of it can still really get into this because it's just so well done. It's so much fun. And we talked about this a lot, how fun this movie is, how much it is just a ride of a movie, that it has kind of a universal appeal. It can appeal to young people, teens and preteens that are kind of focused on this movie. It can appeal more to the adults because they're the adult characters and the way they're worked in the movie. It really has broad appeal. And then we talked a little bit about the sequels that are maybe not quite worth your time as much, but the original definitely was, and we had to talk about it in the video. The next vampire movie we talked about on the video was Interview with the Vampire, which of course is based on the Anne Rice novel of the same name and on the Anne Rice series of novels. I talked a little bit about my experience or exposure to those books, and I talked about my exposure to this movie and how, when the trailer came out, a lot of the Anne Rice fans, including my ex-wife, were really kind of up in arms about Tom Cruise's casting in particular, and Anne Rice herself was worked about that, but how Tom Cruise wound up winning me and pretty much everybody else over with his really excellent performance, even though he is technically totally miscast for this. The rest of the cast around him, Brad Pitt, Antonio Banderas, everybody's great. Kirsten Dunst got special mention in the video because she really blows me away in this movie. She's absolutely stellar in it, but everybody's doing great work in this, including the director Neil Jordan. And we talked about this. Neil Jordan, the way he shoots this movie, it is absolutely gorgeous. It's a beautiful movie, shot like an epic, really just has this wonderful scope and expanse to it that is just a treat for your eyes. and it just really works on pretty much every level. It really did surprise the fans of the book. It's unfortunate that they didn't kind of keep going with this, and maybe they couldn't. We talked a little bit about how they might not be able to pull this off. I don't think we talked too much about Queen of the Damned in there, but this movie didn't really, spawn this franchise that it should have, but it did spawn a cool TV series that I might talk about in a future video. So I won't talk about it here, and I didn't talk about the previous video, but the Interview with the Vampire TV series, definitely worth your time. But we're going to stop there and get into the next movie. And the next movie that we talked about, of course, was 30 Days of Night. And this one doesn't have as much of a reputation as the previous two movies. It doesn't seem like it has quite the same kind of cult love or has the same buzz about it. But it's still well liked and well regarded by people who have seen the movie because it's really, really good. We talked about the comic book that it originated from, the source material, which is very good as well. Excellent artwork in that. I talked about that quite a bit. But how this is a really solid adaptation that may not follow the book completely accurately, but does adapt the material extremely well. And the big thing about this movie that I think not just me, but a lot of people resonate with is how scary the vampires are. They're not sexy, they're not pretty, they're not cool. They are gross and monstrous, and it works extremely well. They're very disturbing looking creatures in this. And of course, the premise is really another thing that really shines in this. This idea of being stuck in a place that is dark, nighttime, for 30 straight days, which is, just wonderful for vampires so they don't have to worry about the sun, is great. We talked about the cast, which included Josh Hartnett, who I'm a big fan of, in no small part because of this movie. Melissa George, who I love, Scream Queen, who's always good. We talked about this a lot in how these actors elevated these characters and made it really, really solid work and a really solid movie, really fun. Underrated in my opinion, underseen in my opinion. So I definitely wanted to talk about it and bring attention to it, which is what I did. And so those are the movies that we talked about on the previous video. Now it's time to get into our new doctorate level selection. Our doctorate level selection for the vampire subgenre is Sinners. Sinners came out this year in 2025, and it was directed by Ryan Coogler. And if those of you who watched my YouTube short out of the theater reaction to this probably aren't surprised by this. It was such a great movie right off the bat that I knew I was going to try to find a place to put it on the syllabus immediately. And this is what I'm doing. I'm doing it right here because this one is basically an instant masterpiece, in my opinion. And I think as award season's coming up, it's going to be shown to be something that gets the recognition that horror movie doesn't usually get. And that's super noteworthy. So of course we're going to talk about it on the syllabus. Now, if by chance you haven't seen it yet, the movie takes place in 1930s Mississippi during the Jim Crow era, and it follows two twin brothers, both played by Michael B. Jordan, who are coming back from Chicago, and they have a notorious criminal reputation in town, and they're opening up a juke joint out in an old sawmill, and they're trying to basically bring something to the community and maybe make some money, but they've got problems with maybe the Klan maybe having a bit of an issue with them, and also some strangers that show up that might be more than they seem. Spoiler alert, they're vampires. But we're going to go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil the movie too much. And this movie was a massive hit. This movie kind of caught everybody by storm. Like, it really made a huge impression at the box office. It made a huge impression with the critics, and it made a huge impression with me personally. This movie knocked my socks off. Now, I had seen the trailer, and I think I even said in my YouTube short that the trailer spoils a bit because it does tip off that there's vampires in the movie. And you wouldn't necessarily realize this in the movie if you went in cold without knowing what it's about, because it spends a lot of time on the period piece drama aspect of this. Set in the 1930s, having this whole Jim Crow era where, black folk are basically trying to make their living, and there's still the separation with the white folk and all the other races there, the Chinese people who are trying to do business with both sides of the street, so to speak. All of this stuff is super fascinating, and it's building out these characters, and the characters are incredibly rich. First, you've got Michael G.B. Jordan playing two roles, twin brothers, and they are very distinct characters, and they're both fascinating, and you like both of them very much. And you've got Haley Steinfeld as one of their love interests. You've got Wunmi Musaku as another love interest. You've got Delroy Lindo showing up as a blues player. Miles Canton showing up in, I think, his first film role as a blues singer, young blues singer who's also the twins' cousin. And he steals the show, both with his performance and with his singing. And the music in this is a big key of this. The music being, mostly blues with some Irish music thrown in there, some modern stuff thrown in there because of this whole mythology about music and its appeal and its way to cross genres, cross generations, cross people, bring people from the dead. It's a really spiritual experience with the music that ties into the narrative of the story extremely well, and kind of ties into the vampire aspect of this too. But it also ties into the themes, which I'll get into in a minute. But this music by Ludwig Göransson, who did the score, who is the guy who does the Mandalorian music for the Star Wars show, and Boo Mitchell, who brought in the blues aspect and brought in the blues artist in there to give it an authentic blues feel, really is a key part of this movie. The music in this is essential. It's a central part of the movie, both in terms of story and in terms of theme, and it also is just fantastic. It's going to have you tapping your toes. It's going to have you really embracing all this. And the music, and the way they worked it into the plot, which again, I'm trying not to spoil too much in case you haven't seen it, is ingenious. It really does make the music so essential to the story and make a lot of sense, and just makes it resonate that much more. Just not just the sound, but the way it means so much and the way it's shown to mean so much in the movie is excellent. This is all capped off by an incredible one take shot that Coogler does, that's showing the music and the effect of the music on the people at the juke joint, and how the music does span generations, and how it brings in past, present, and future. And they show this visually in a way that is admittedly gimmicky, but who cares, because it is just done so beautifully, so well. It just knocks your socks off. And I guarantee you, if this movie gets nominated for Oscars, this is the clip they're going to show when they're talking about the movie, because it's just visually stunning. Such a cool, captivating shot that must have been so complex to do, technically speaking. It's Coogler showing off, but man, he's earned it, because this is really incredible. Now, the way that they've tied this music and these themes together is great. You've got this whole theme of oppression of black folk in America, right? It's kind of obvious. But then there's this appropriation aspect of this too. How people want to kind of appropriate things that are rooted in black culture, namely music, namely the blues in this particular case, right? This is actually expressly stated at one point in the movie, where they're talking about how white folk want to use the blues, but they don't like where the blues comes from. It's a speech that Delroy Lindo gives. It hits very hard. It's very well delivered. It's really rich. But then you're seeing this later too, with the way that the vampires want to get into the juke joint and want to become part of this. And they want to assimilate the black folk into their collective and become one people, because they want access to that music. They want access to Miles Canton's character's voice. It's fascinating. It's a great way of showing this, but it's also layered, because it's not just villainous vampires. What they're pitching is interesting. It's tempting on the surface. And the idea of using an Irish vampire as the lead vampire, and his history of coming through a different type of oppressed people and the way they were oppressed. And so there is this kinship or camaraderie between the Irish and the black folk. There's like a synergy there that makes you kind of believe, wow, you could maybe get talked into this. It's pretty slick. It's a pretty clever way to balance this out. I don't think you ever lose sight of the fact that the vampires are, in fact, monsters. They are creepy looking, not unlike the way for 30 Days, not quite as creepy as 30 Days a Night, but pretty creepy. And this movie does get gory at the end. When this movie goes full-born vampire movie, it gets crazy. It gets wild. It tips its hand slightly early when you get the Choctaw Indians trying to capture the head vampire, and that's when you start to realize, and you're reminded you're in a horror movie, because you've been watching this period piece drama with these rich characters for about an hour, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's right, there's monsters in this movie, and it's great. It's great that it comes there, but it all is fitting in with the themes too. These themes of these people being kind of isolated out and separate from society and kind of making their own society. It's all tied together really, really well. Now, Coogler knows what he's doing. He has cited From Dusk Till Dawn as a reference of his. From Dusk Till Dawn is a movie that we talked about on the channel as well. I think it was in actually a previous video. But it has this whole thing where it's kind of one movie and then it's another movie. And this movie kind of does a little bit of that too. But it's also got the Faustian bargain in there as an influence. It's got some other influences here too that's making for a really rich character study where you care about every single character. Every single character in this movie you care about. And they each get an arc and they each get a moment, and they matter to you. And of course that makes for a really rough third act where not everybody's going to make it out alive, right? So it does a great job of getting you emotionally invested in this movie, which is its key. It's an emotional movie that I think appeals to anybody. I'm telling you, a lot of non-horror fans checked this movie out and loved it. I had discussions with people saying, well, it's not really a horror movie. No, it is. This is the best of what horror can do. Horror can do so much that you can basically see aspects of this that appeal to people that even don't like horror movies. And I think that's pretty special. And I'm glad this movie was recognized for this. It got so much mainstream appeal. It had huge box office. The critics loved it. Everybody was on board with this one, to the point where maybe there's a bit of a backlash now. People are sick of hearing about it. Maybe it's a little bit obvious that that this would be the movie I'd pick for the Doctorate Level selection, but I don't care. It's just a masterpiece. It's rare that I see a movie and I'm just like, yes, this movie is a movie that's going to be talked about for decades, if not longer. This is a movie that's going to change the industry because Ryan Coogler kept ownership rights to this. After 25 years, the rights revert back to him. That's something that's unheard of in the industry for a mainstream movie that was backed by a major studio, Warner Brothers. So that's interesting. We're going to see how that shakes out in the next couple of decades, but I think it's going to be game changing. And this movie is so important on so many levels, from a historical standpoint, from a horror standpoint, from bringing people into the horror fold that don't usually watch horror. And then again, we'll see what happens in awards time, but this movie is just on all cylinders excellent. I could nitpick a little thing here and there, but I don't want to because I just love it so much. And I'm guessing a lot of you have seen it. If you haven't, I implore you to check it out. You know, the hype is real. It really is excellent. So definitely check it out. And if you're new to it, let me know what you think, because I love it, and I know a lot of other people do too. But if you don't, that's okay. Let's talk about it in the comments and have a discussion. It's okay if you have a different opinion. I'd love to hear about it, but definitely high recommend for me. So check it out. So that's my pick for the Doctorate selection for the vampire subgenre. But of course, I'm going to review an extra credit selection as well, because this is the one that would have been the Doctorate level selection if Sinners had never come out. And it's The Addiction. Now, The Addiction came out in 1995 and was directed by Abel Ferrara, a pretty noteworthy, kind of notorious director. We talked about him previously on the channel with The Driller Killer, but he's done a lot of other movies. Bad Lieutenant comes to mind off the top of my head. Other movies that are pretty noteworthy or kind of notorious or controversial, and so that's kind of his bag, kind of his shtick. And this one might be a little controversial as well, but we're going to get into it in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie stars Lily Taylor as a doctorate candidate in New York. She's a student, and one time when she's walking home, she gets met by a woman who turns out to be a vampire and bites her. And of course, after that, she starts to have these cravings for blood and starts winding up having to battle this addiction to killing and drinking people. And it's going to be a bit of a struggle. And of course, hijinks abound. But we're going to go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil the movie. But this movie is a fascinating time period piece. And by that, I mean personally speaking, because this is a movie that came out while I was in college and I was working at a movie theater. So as a result, I was able to see everything for free. We had like 5 or 6 movie theaters in town. They were all owned by the same company, or most of them were. And so we could go to any of these movie theaters. And so I started seeing everything. And it's where I found my affection for indie film. Before that was just kind of watching mainstream movies, whatever would come out. But this is where I discovered indie film and really got into it. And this is a indie film through and through. It's shot in black and white. It's got a very 90s aesthetic. It's got 90s music in it. And it's got a lot of named actors who are maybe a little more famous now, but kind of were in the indie scene then. Lily Taylor, of course, being the big one as the star, kind of the indie darling back then. People maybe know her better now from like The Conjuring and stuff like that. But back then, she was an indie darling. She was anchoring this movie. But you also had Christopher Walken, again, more of indie at that time. You had Edie Falco, Annabella Sciorra, Michael Imperioli. I don't know why there's so many people from The Sopranos in there, but there were Paul Calderone. Like, it's a really solidly great cast, frankly, and everybody's doing really good work here. But it's got this whole allegory. I mean, it's not even an allegory. It's very on the nose. It's called The Addiction, and it's very clearly thematically about drug addiction. And when you look into the history of this, Abel Ferrara did have a heroin addiction that he struggled with for some time. And this is part of his kind of coping with that or working that out in this movie. And it's very on the nose, but it's very effective. The idea of being bitten by the vampire and it leading to these cravings and stuff like that works really well, narratively speaking. And Lily Taylor plays it very well as an addiction, as something she's trying to fight and trying to go through these withdrawals and things like that. And the way she approaches it does feel very much like what you would see in a movie about drug addiction. And the allegory, again, is very on the nose, very blatant, very obvious, but it's also weaving in some other things too, right? It's got this whole discussion about what is sin or what is evil. tied to religion, because there's some religious aspects of this movie. There's a priest character and stuff like that, and it's got a lot of tackling and philosophy. Like Lily Taylor's character is a philosophy student, and she's getting her doctorate. And there's a lot of academia in this movie. They're shown in class. They're shown making discussions about things. There's a lot of quotes, literary quotes in there, and literary references in there. Honestly, to the point where it feels slightly pretentious. Again, this is an indie movie. This is an art house film, and it's very cerebral, very academic. And it's really leaning into that and wearing that on its sleeve, for better and for worse. Because like I said, you could watch this and feel like it's coming off a little bit pretentious, a little bit preachy, really trying to be kind of academic and nerdy, but it's also really stylish. Like I said, shot in black and white, and it's shot beautifully. Abel Ferrara is just shooting this kind of like a noir film, like a neo-noir, and it looks gorgeous. The black and white is just very rich. And honestly, it probably offsets a little bit of the gory stuff, but the movie's not too gory overall. It's really kind of tame when it comes to gore. The ending gets a little bit gory, but again, in black and white, you're not really feeling it, but it's really not as gory as some of the other movies we've talked about in the vampire subgenre. It really is kind of like a hint of sexy. It's not overtly sexy, like, say, Interview with a Vampire or something like that, but it's got a hint of sexiness to it too. But at the end, it's really fixated on the drug analogy. And again, it kind of got that 90s indie feel that is really working for it. It really does make sense. Now, this movie wasn't a big hit. It kind of flopped, actually. It was bad box office. And the critics' love was there for it, but that did not lead to dollars. But interestingly, it also didn't lead to like a cult following, really. This is a movie that doesn't seem like it gets a whole lot of love. People don't seem like they're talking about it that much anymore. It's underseen, in my opinion. And I'm not sure if it just hasn't aged super well. Like, there was some controversy at the time that there's an aspect of this movie where they're talking about like real war atrocities, and kind of showing pictures from that, stuff like that, and making these allegorical connections between that and the addiction, the vampirism, that maybe is a little bit insensitive. And I know it got some heat for that back in the day. And I know there's an aspect of this where it kind of could be read as a little bit of like victim blaming, the way that people are, attacked by the vampire, and then what they kind of go through, and putting things on the victim. Maybe that's something that doesn't translate super well in the modern society, but I don't think that's why this movie's not enduring or not getting the attention it deserves. It just seems like it's underseen. It never seems like it quite found its audience. It's maybe it's the ambiguous ending. The ending is a little bit odd out there. I love the ending, but I don't think everybody would love the ending. I'm not exactly sure what it is that makes this movie not connect with people, but it kind of makes me disappointed, because I do think it's excellent. And admittedly, maybe that's a little bit from me having a certain nostalgia for it from when I saw it, the period of time it was, the period of where I was in my life, and the method by which I was able to see this, and the world I was living in terms of film at that moment in time. Maybe it's just me, but I rewatched it for this video, and I still think it's great. I still think it's a wonderful movie, really well made, with excellent performances. People doing things that you're not used to seeing them doing. Edie Falco being rather sweet and innocent. Christopher Walken being not super creepy and weird and strange, but actually kind of straightforward and cool. It's interesting to see people doing this work that they're not usually doing. And again, it's just shot beautifully. It's interesting, and admittedly, on the nose for an allegory, and might be a little complex. It's not really nearly as complex and deep as it thinks it is. I'll admit that, but it's still a really fascinating watch that I find to be very entertaining. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend checking it out. And of course, let me know what you think, but I'm guessing a lot of you haven't seen it. So please check it out. It's one that deserves more eyeballs. So I definitely would like to see more people see The Addiction. So that's going to do it for us revisiting the vampire subgenre and getting a new Doctorate Level selection here. Like I said, sometimes it's just a new movie comes out since I've done the syllabus, and I really want to talk about it and get it on there. And Sinners was definitely that. The Addiction is one that I've been wanting to highlight for a while, and I'm finally getting a chance to do that. So both of these movies, for me, are ones you should absolutely spend your time on. They're excellent. Now it's time to spend some time on a Horror Trivia Pursuit card. As usual, I'm going to read a card here live on camera and try to answer it, a trivia question, and hopefully not embarrass myself. And since we're talking about vampires, we're going to talk about the monster category on the card, okay? And the question is this. Well, this is fortuitous. The leader of the vampires in 2007's 30 Days of Night is played by what actor? And you can bet that I know this one. I was literally just talking about this movie in this video when I was doing the recap, right? 30 Days a Night, again, I feel like it's underseen. Not as underseen as The Addiction, but I feel like it's underseen, needs to be seen more. And I did highlight that the performances in this movie were part of what make it great. I didn't mention this actor's name. I didn't mention this actor's name, so there's a clue for you. It's not Josh Hartnett, right? Because Josh Hartnett's the protagonist in the movie. This would be the lead antagonist in the movie, the leader of the vampires. And like I said, the vampires in this movie are really creepy looking. They are really monstrous looking. And this vampire in particular is really great because the performance is excellent. And the hint I'll give you is that this actor has done some other roles where they are the bad guy. And so they kind of have like that going for them is like a thing, or maybe it's kind of like I don't know, like pigeonholed or typecasting. I don't think so, because pretty sure I've seen this actor do other things that are not bad guy related, but in this case, he's perfect for this role. He really like chews the scenery. He really is great. He's not big in terms of like campiness, but he's big in terms of like total villain, very bad guy, and just kind of scary, over the top scary, and it's very effective. So I know the answer. I'm pretty like 99% sure I know the answer to this question. And I say 1% just because in case I'm wrong or say it wrong or whatever, but I'm very certain about this. So lock in your answer because I'm about to give my answer. Okay, you good? Okay, you're locked in. So my answer is, of course, Danny Houston. Danny Houston plays the scary as hell big bad lead vampire, and the card says Danny Houston. Danny Houston. So I was right about that one. It was fortuitous. Like I said, I love the cast in this movie. I didn't mention Danny Houston by name earlier, and I'm glad I didn't because I would have kind of spoiled this question for y'all. But did you get it right? Did you know it was Danny Houston? Are you familiar with Danny Houston in other movies? Like I said, sometimes I've seen him be in bad movies, but he's always good. Even when he's in a bad movie, he's good in it. So let me know if you got this one right or if you got any funny bad answers for me. Also, let me know if there's some other vampire movies that you think should be on the horror movie syllabus. If it's something I haven't seen before, maybe I'll check it out and do a video on it. But until then, I'm just going to say, class dismissed.